guidelines. There is a resolution that we currently have for our protocol that sits on board docs. That's because we are a new board. It's time for us to review that, and whether we need to keep it, tweak it, or change it. Those are the discussions that the board can today. I placed some questions and some documents for your review, such as key work for school boards. Those are questions that have been drafted by the National School Board Association as what's referred to as 30,000-foot questions that our board, any board who's operating from a governance stance, and sometimes governance is hard to fully understand. The idea is that you as a board are responsible for how the organization works, and there are individuals, obviously, the staff and team who are responsible for the operational aspects of how. There are questions that are fairly common, at the same time allow us to continue to ask how we work and in what ways. Those are there for your review. I know that we discussed focusing on superintendent evaluation and scheduling, so there's a calendar in the folder for our review, certainly for the board to review when, based on the calendar that's currently set, when would be ideal opportunities to, one, to create an opportunity for evaluation so that it's fair and reasonable at the same time, to make sure that you have enough time to assess based on the evaluation instrument that we're using, and then self-evaluation, also to discuss board self-evaluation, which is also a requirement of ourselves. How are we helping to support each other, also in our growth, our learning, our performance, and how we help improve ourselves accountable. The informational aspects at the bottom of the agenda, as you see before you, all leaders should be readers and learners. These are books that are fairly important to our work. Strengths-based leadership is one. And then a manual that's fairly common amongst school boards nationwide. The two leaders, Ryan Godwin and Todd Waver, are fairly well known in this work. And it's just a manual. It's not a Bible or how-to exactly what the work is, but it is suggestive best we know practices about what boards are responsible for. And I'd love for us to use this, just as I do with staff, as a potential book study or essential resource for us to use as we go through this work. We are a new board, and I know that in the interest of this work, we also know that we can't know all of this in one month or two. We'll continue to learn this work while we take care of our organization. Let me step back and offer an opportunity for discussion, questions, and what would you like to discuss next?
I mean, I know that I'll say that I aggressively pushed for this meeting because, you know, it's, as you mentioned, it's February and we've been on the board for a long time. And WASTA conference gave us a lot of solid stuff and some really good information. I went to a session on the final day that they used the board self-evaluation tool, and they used districts that had used that tool for 5 years consistently in a row. And even though it's a self-evaluation tool, it really told them a lot. Plus what they did with those 25 districts who had done it for 5 years. And what they did with those groups also is they, at the same time, it was a psychologist and a school professor of education. And so they looked at districts all across the spectrum and took the self-evaluation tool, anyone who had participated for 5 years. And then they did observations, and they went to the districts and found, they had some, what they call symptoms of, districts that weren't functioning well. And then they looked at all the data, and they did interviews. So they didn't just look at data, they met with people. And so the interesting things I found were that districts that had the happiest community were the they did very well on the piece of involving community, especially like in curriculum, things like that. Boards that did that in districts that had a very, it was two pieces. So districts that had strong boards also had strong outcomes for graduation and the smallest gap in outcomes for different, when we look at different groups, races, and making sure that our students of color are achieving equal to, and so the districts with that smallest gap, in addition to the piece of involving the community, also did the whole work of the goal superintendent goal evaluation piece, which is very complex. And putting on my little HR hat, there's short-term and there's long-term goals. So the long-term goals are important, but also the short-term, what are the day-to-day expectations of the job? And every job has different, and the only way, and we're in a supervisory position on this board, but the only way for the person that we all supervise together to succeed, and thereby the district succeeds, is to give that person very clear expectations, and we're 5 people, so it's a unique situation. But what I've been confused about, what I haven't seen, is those clear expectations from everything as simple as, if Director Vengadaslam asks something from the dais, and then I hear, I've asked it many, many times, and it hasn't been delivered, something that you asked for, then my brain says, oh, there's not been any clear expectation given so that there can be success, right, for the outcome. And then, Vice President Daniels, I've seen you at meetings ask the same question over and over and not get answers, and repeatedly, especially like when we talk about discipline, and they're all really good questions that I want to know too, and I don't ever get an answer. So again, in order to, I think, and you are free to disagree with me, and that's why there's 5 of us. But again, my goal is success for students, and that starts with leadership. And the only way that someone in a leadership position knows what the people who evaluate performance and behavior expect, we need to set those expectations together and discuss it so that there's no confusion and so that the needs are met in order for us, I think, I'll say, just speak for myself, so the needs are met so that I can feel confident that my board colleagues are getting what they need and that I'm getting what I need to understand that a decision made and actions taken support the whole vision and mission of the board, and make sure that we are doing things equitably and with excellence and involving the community. So again, it's an interesting situation because there's 5 of us, but it's also, there can be just standard day-to-day expectations, like, if someone asks for something from the dais or asks for an answer, how do we be respectful and say, how long could it take to get that answer, and I really want that answer. So whether it's adding an old business piece on the agenda, whether it's asking for an old business piece on the agenda where we can close loops. I spoke to a superintendent at WASTA because I tried to talk to a lot of people, and one of the things he said to suggest too is, when you're asking a question or asking for information, is like, how long will it take to get to that answer, and then making sure the loop gets closed so that there's trust built. And so, if a question gets asked and then repeatedly asked and it's not answered, my impression as a constituent and a community member before I was elected was, the board is being ignored, and just being completely honest. But like I said, you cannot, it's not fair to someone that you supervise to not set expectations as clear. So some, some jobs have a strict time requirement, so it's, it's like you have to be on time because it negatively impacts the team. There has to be a positive reason for that, but again, successful outcomes only come with successful expectations set. And, the long-term goals, I'm struggling with because I don't have any measures to start with. And then just the day-to-day, what I've observed and what I've felt, I've really been looking at, the governance and the board governance, and I just personally, and again, I'm one of 5 people, but I think that there need to be the short-term, day-to-day expectations to assure success, and there need to be long-term expectations. So then the person that we all, evaluate has clear expectations that we all talk about and agree upon, and probably this, and again, we just went through it, and it would be something we'd have to vote on, just like the board protocols. But the quickest way to success is clear expectations.
So I think you said a lot there, and I'm trying to unpack some of it. So I think that one of the things that we probably need to, in my opinion, focus on first is, in order to establish a shared vision, we have to get together as a board to establish that. So one person having one set of expectations and then someone else having a different set of expectations, I think that's not really going to get the results that we want because we're not on the same page. And I think possibly getting a clear understanding of, how things have been developed so far, and then, having a conversation about what we'd like to change together as a board, I think would be a great step to start that work. I don't know that all of us would have the same goals. Like you said, you're one of 5 people, and so I think it's important for all of us to talk about that together and determine what the goals are. I think this is unique in that we are the evaluator, and our response is to evaluate and hire the superintendent. I don't know that the day-to-day stuff is what we manage. I think when you think about the role of a school board, I think maybe there's some consensus we need to come to about what exactly that looks like. Definitely goal setting, definitely monitoring it, but how deeply do we get into the day-to-day is not something that typically school boards do.
Did the previous board have an expectation on how soon constituents were answered?
Well, I think so.
Because I think that's an important. So to me, that's like just a basic job function. So that's one of the things that So what was it?
So I think one of the challenges is when you understand how a question's asked. So what typically happens is you have, like if I have a question from the dais and I ask a question that's specific to to take the discipline data. Typically what has to happen is that, so my question, if it can be asked across the dais, but then if it's not, I follow up directly with Dr. Watts, who then has to go to Randy Heath, and then who has to go to other people. I think there's an assumption that every question asked, the answer comes directly from Dr. Watts, and that's not at all the case in most cases. Now there should be, I agree, there should be an expectation of response. I don't disagree with that. I just don't know, depending on the question is as complex as well. It could be something as simple as Dr. Watts, what's on the agenda for this week versus, can you tell me about the research and implementation of MTSS and what that looked like? So I think that there's a variety of ways, and I know this because I have to answer questions at times that come from my board, and it comes down and filters down through to me eventually. So it's just, there is a process depending on the nature of the question that you're asking. But I do agree there should be an expectation of communication and response, definitely.
Right, so, and,
I'm sorry.
One of the things that I think has been frustrating, but yet I understand, is that when we are asking questions from the dais, there are restrictions in how they can respond very quickly. For example, one of the things that we said about the vouchers, that's been years in the making. And the voucher questions, how those reports are laid out, where we don't have historical context. one of the frustrations with that is that in the past, we had a list of things that went out from the district, and I specifically asked for by audit code, can you give us that information by audit code? So they went back and worked around that report so that we can have a report that's a little bit more understandable and usable. The problem with that is that it doesn't capture historical data, and so to revamp that entire process, takes time, and so it's been frustrating for me to not get that information, but I do know that they were working on something, and I know there are issues surrounding it, how we can get that report in a timely manner, or how you can get that in a format that the new board will understand. So I think there's another issue of, when boards change, boards require different things, they ask for different things, and so you may, that report, the voucher report, and the safety report were specifically done because I went in and I asked for something of a different layout, different ways of putting data together. So that was something that I requested when I came in, but we know that everybody has different ways of doing data. So that's one of the difficulties, with change in the board, and to have this particular thing, we didn't want to make several decisions because the new board is coming.
Right.
And so it's sad, and helps a day to discuss protocols and various other things. So I don't think it's an issue of not wanting to onboard, and I think that I saw your email about onboarding. It's really important that when I came on as a board member, I went to every department and I went and had a meeting. I set up a meeting and I sat with them and they had binders. They were really, really open and helpful in helping me understand the district. I didn't have a mentor. Denise didn't have a mentor. It was up to us to go, and that's what I would advise you. We have to do some of this work on our own. It can't be something that's just pushed on us, which is typical. And I think that's the part that is really difficult for new board members to understand, because we think that everything's going to be ready and prepared. And there's a lot of responsibility on ourselves to be able to get that information. So, I'm trying to respond
Right.
to
No, yeah.
You
Yeah, that's
And I'm glad you brought the onboarding, because I do notice that you, a couple of times, said nobody's onboarded you, and I reached out to you a couple of times to say, hey, Michelle, would you like to meet and talk about? There's some things I want to share with you. I was able to meet with Leah, and we just kind of had conversation and asked questions. You did not take me up on that, so so do you see your frustration about, neither one of us reaching out to you or onboarding you is not exactly, it's just, we just haven't been able to connect. The offer's been there, but there's no formal onboarding.
Right, so to clarify my expectation, because I might not have been clear, or when I use the word onboarding, I might not be clear. From my background, onboarding is, especially because the majority of the board is new, so what I expected and imagined is, because it's in policy that there's onboarding, it's 11112. I expected that there would be a session like this as early as possible, where we sat down and understood, just the questions on if as a community member, my biggest frustration was not getting answers, and again, I'm all about, I want to see the documents, not just hear the words. And so as a community member, I felt frustrated for board members that I watched asking the same questions, quarterly, and no answers being given or things like that. And so to close the loop, I needed to understand that. But I think when I think of onboarding, I think of not just individual conversations, and I really appreciate that. And I'm sorry we didn't get together. But I think, just like we talked about in ATMA, just little one-off conversations about how one person does it versus just all of us getting in a room together and just going, so how does this work? And all of us hearing the answer, so we're all on the same page, is what I imagined onboarding would look like, is that we would all be together and talk and be on the same page as early as possible, asking questions, and, you know, understanding how things worked. You know, even as simple as sitting down at the dais and not even knowing how to, not even realizing a computer would be there, and not even a sticky note to say, oh, just type this and you can get in. And so, you know, it gave the feeling of feeling unwelcome. And again, so that was just my expectation. When I see onboarding and it's a board and there's 3 majority new members, that's what I was expecting, is all of us to sit down so we could ask questions. So we knew directors could ask questions and then get to hear the answers and understand background on how things work.
And that makes perfect sense, but that was never communicated. So if that was your ask, because what you specifically said was, Maya and Denise did not onboard you on a couple of different occasions.
I
So I'm
didn't-
just saying your specific
Okay,
ask.
I didn't ever use your names.
You
I-
did,
yes.
it's in the
Did I?
emails, yes, you did. And
Okay.
so twice, and so
Okay.
what I'm saying is, if you would ask that, or, so I guess we don't know your expectation until you share it.
My expectation was what policy said.
And policy said we'd sit down in a meeting and onboard you?
It just said onboarding, and my past experience with onboarding
Right.
is that it's all the new members together. Anytime I've ever participated in onboarding, it's everyone new all together.
So I don't want to belabor this, but one of the things that I feel, and this is from my perspective, is that I got the sense from some emails that I saw that there were intentions as a new board to come in and change it to the way they wanted it and not follow what has happened in the past. I mean, that's how I read the emails that I saw, and you might not know that I saw that, but I don't know. But in any case, when I see that there are intentions to come in and change things because we're a new board, and then I'm hearing that nobody should be talking to me and that sort of thing, then I get to start, you know, there's an issue of trust, and how do we trust people who are just coming in to get their way in certain things and not collaborate. So yes, I think all of us want to have this meeting to kind of discuss, you know, where have we gone wrong, what can we do better. You know, I think it's really important, and these protocols are laid out for that purpose, and this is the only time as a board we ever get to talk about protocols. I've been a work session specifically for this, and in January of last year, I was not here, so I was not even part of this discussion. So that's the only meeting I think I met in the midst of over the years, that no one is my head. But when this is discussed, it's really important that we look at it, and I mean, we've gone back and forth on it several meetings, so I guess, you know, my request would be, you know, let's get the word and look at this. And
Well,
see.
I do want to say something. I don't want to belabor this, but just from my perspective, I mean, I'm coming from a business background, and I know meetings are not fun to go to. That's why, I mean, I actually wanted to have an extra board meeting. Why I pushed for that is because I felt kind of lost, and I mean, every job I've ever had, the training came right up front, okay, and some of it I had to figure out myself, but I just thought the basics, you know, in December would have been, you know, before we, and I know it's a holiday and all that, but if you're expected to do all this and start, you know, running start on it, you need a little bit of background, and I'm not criticizing anybody, I felt lost.
But who did you ask for the assistance?
Well, I asked for a special meeting, and in my email was to talk about protocol and policies.
Well, that special meeting was 2 things.
Right.
It had to do with policies, it had to do with evaluation, 2 things.
Well, I didn't put that on. I put on there, I mean, I don't know who put the evaluations on, that didn't come out of my mouth. It did not.
That's what the email said. So I think it's
Not my email, because I wouldn't even be in a position to talk about evaluation.
policy is what you were specifically.
Yeah, and what I meant is how we go about doing this job, because the only manual I had in front of me was a huge thing with policies in it. And so that's what I'm thinking is, we're gonna go over how we're gonna daily do our job and in meetings and stuff like that. I mean, you guys are, you have to look at it from I mean, it's easy to look from when you've been on this for a while and understand it. It's when you have new people coming into this. I mean, I know how to go out and find out information. I've worked at jobs where I'm thrown into it and I had to just dive in and do it. But I just thought that right off the bat, we would have a lot. WASA does not train you to do this individual board stuff. It doesn't.
So as the new, besides you guys, the newest board member, I can share my experience because I came in during a very difficult time.
Yeah.
And I had to, not only was I trying to learn how to do the job, I was also trying to backtrack and figure out where we had went wrong because there were so many things happening. And at the same time, trying to be responsive to community members. And I know you've had a little bit of experience as to how that can slightly be overwhelming on a smaller scale. But I think one of the things that I learned very quickly was I have to ask specifically for what I want. So if I needed support in a certain way, then, and learning the protocol of what that looked like, right? How to, I was supposed to have someone that worked alongside me, and that never happened. And so, but it was really me going through and reading information, and because, again, understanding this is one of the things we do. Many people have jobs outside, and they have families, and then thinking about also the impact on staff, because they also work full days and the impact of what it looks like when we call some meetings at times. That means that they have to stay longer as well, and their days get longer. And thinking about that, and some people have to be compensated outside of their regular. So just thinking about the impact as a whole. But I think if you ask for what it is you need from either one of us, we're happy to help and happy to come alongside. But it seems as though, like Maya said, at least two of you came in, it seemed like, with a specific agenda. And so for us, it was like, okay, so maybe we should just back up because now the board's flipped and you guys are going to change things and do things. And so it's just like, okay, well, let's just see what you want to do. Because you obviously had, and I don't know, I'm just assuming from the communications, you hadn't had an agenda coming onto the board. And so we're just trying to figure out what does that look like and how we can work together. And is there room for us to work together? Because to be honest, I know you, Michelle, were very disenfranchised with both of us and have called for us to step down and have led some of those conversations. And so then it's like, so do you want to work with us or do you want to? We're not sure exactly what it is you want to do. So I think coming in from you in particular, have filed a lawsuit and have been very active in your communication about getting rid of the superintendent and all of those things and us stepping down. So we're not exactly sure what your expectation is of us. So I think that's why we need to have these conversations and just put that out there and say, okay, what is this moving forward? And how can we trust that you're not, necessarily thinking or, wanting us to step down or trying to, whatever that looks like, or participating in that still. And participating in, your agenda being, well, getting rid of the superintendent still. So I'm trying to figure out how we can trust that you're objective in what you're asking. Are you asking objectively, or are you asking with an intent to accomplish a goal that you have? So I guess that's the confusion for me, because I've been here the last couple of years and I've had communications from you, and you too, Leslie, at times. So if we're going to work together, I think we have to be able to, and even still, I'm like, okay, I'll reach out to you guys and let me see how I can help you. So I'm really trying just to really make this work. But I don't know what your expectation is. Okay. So maybe that's what we need to come to an understanding of.
Okay. I wrote it down in case I forgot that you asked that question. What my expectation is, I've been very vocal that I don't think things are working. And in this district, and even recent situations that have happened, again, I feel like my biggest concern is that kids be served and that they're served equitably. But that doesn't come without a foundation. What we're asking our kids to do is follow rules and show their work and all those things. I think for a point in time, maybe not any longer, but kids even had to sign a document that said they would follow the rules. And then every expectation in classroom setting is, the hardest thing is you got to show your work when you're doing math and things like that. And so I came in and I decided to run for board because I felt like I had exhausted every opportunity to get to the foundational truth of what I saw happening, which feels to me from an outside observer, and honestly even now being on the board, that there is a lot of the culture of this district as far as employees and citizens that I've observed and felt is that there's a lot of the culture is to hide, cover up, and I'm not saying that that is true. I'm saying that's my impression. And then there's I've seen what feels like, and haven't been on the inside, but retaliation to people, and retaliation can be anything from as simple as ignoring someone, ostracizing someone. It looks a lot like bullying, but the difference is it's people in power exerting authority. And so so I felt like, a lot of my experience in HR and things, I just felt like things didn't seem like they were being done appropriately. And I have a concern, I'll just point out that the field test for the African American culture, the African American education, EverFi, I researched EverFi. It is a company that does student loans, and my biggest concern is that students of color are being targeted for predatory lending practices. And so that's why I wanted to make sure that that the field test had been approved, had been done properly, that the form had been turned in, that the curriculum review committee had reviewed it. I wanted to see the data sharing agreement to make sure students weren't sharing any private data. Quite frankly, I'm appalled that it's not part of the regular curriculum. I heard that at the Martin Luther King dedication, that's not even part of regular curriculum, which appalls me because, I think it should be. So that for that piece of information, I just wanted to know that so I could feel comfortable knowing that students were being protected and they weren't being targeted for predatory lending. That's a long filtered thing, but that's where how my brain works. I look for patterns, I seek logic, and I said it at the beginning of this meeting. The only way to succeed in this district and have success and to be ethical and make sure that every employee has the opportunity to succeed is to make sure that expectations are clear. And as a citizen sitting back and watching that, when Maya was president, watching her, her frustration at, asking for things and not getting them for a long, long time, I feel empathy to that because I've experienced that as a citizen long before even this administration. And so honestly, I have no career because of this board work, which is fine. I stepped into it eyes wide open, and I am not saying in any way, shape, or form I am upset about that. But I have no agenda. I don't want to go on to public office. I don't have any desire to have a career in education in any way, shape, or form. I want things to be better for kids. And I want things to be done, I want our kids to see our leaders doing what we expect our kids to do.
And so, going back to my question, again, knowing how your position that you felt as, at least for Maya and I, coming onto the board, what is your expectation?
My expectation is that I'm...
us working together. So how are we going to then come to, because it's obvious you have a lack of trust for us.
Oh, yeah.
We have a lack of trust for you.
Oh, yeah.
So I think that's the piece that we really need to try and figure out how we can at least come to a consensus that we can work together successfully. And so that's kind of where we are. So we're talking about expectations.
Yeah.
The one thing about expectations, and I say this all the time, and I learned this from my kids, my expectations are about me. It has nothing to do with you because it's what I think should happen. And if I don't share that with you or I don't share that with others, then it's really hard. It's not on them to meet something they don't know about me. So I think that, again, being able to work together to share our expectations and see, yes, we can meet that, no, we might not be able to meet that, or how we can come together, I think is going to be the way that we can begin to build a working relationship
I agree.
and come to a common understanding.
So really easily, my expectation is that every opportunity, law, policy, contract are followed. And that's always been my expectation. And I've thought I've been pretty clear. I've seen a big gap between words that are spoken and then what I see in documents. So I expect words to be supported with documentation so I can feel, confident that everything was done in the best interest of a kid, a teacher, whoever we're, now it's also children, but it's the people that are in the schools with those children. So, yeah, I'm glad we're having this
It's what you believe
conversation.
is the best interest, because the reality is a lot of people have different beliefs about what's in the best interest. So I think that's a key to remember also.
Absolutely, you're absolutely right.
Is that what you believe is in the best interest? And I think that's another piece that we have to understand.
And I think we need to give grace a
Exactly.
little bit, because I feel like, during my years of being president, there were so many things that were nitpicked on,
Oh, God.
that we are
Our late meetings, like we've had a late meeting since but it hasn't been picked up with this board, right?
So I think, I think we tend to focus on the minor issues, and we have major issues to focus on, and we nitpick on little things like content abuse, alcohol harassment.
Not gambling in and gambling out on time.
So,
or those
yeah,
pieces.
And so all those pieces to me are, it's a symptom of, it's like, sometimes as an observer, it felt like a blatant disregard to any rules, norms, law, contract, policy, and it just adds up, and it's like boiling a frog, or just, death by 1,000 cuts. And so
But
it's,
it doesn't help to continually talk about something that's being done, for example, our policies, going to lockstep. To continually say, we're not touching that policy, updated, the board hasn't looked at it. We know that, and we're addressing it this way. So, I don't understand how, when there are steps being taken to address some issues that are brought, and I will say, the whole discussion with, videotaping our meetings, all of these things have been requested, and I appreciate that the public has come forward with this administration to talk about things that were missing in the past, that were concerns that weren't addressed. So it was a learning experience for all of us, and we took it in a very positive way. But the issue I have is that when we do that, and we accept that there are issues in our history, and we're addressing it, then you continually bring up the fact that we're not addressing it, and we're not looking at it, and it's outdated, and we go back to the, when the situation was really dire. That to me is problematic, because we're not moving towards this. We're going that towards and that's the part that I'm having struggle understanding. Why do we waste our time on these little things that are we're not necessarily adhering to, when there are so many other things that we should be fixing. I struggle with that. So
It's okay. I was just thinking, I wonder if it would be helpful if we all maybe set some agreements with each other as a group to agree on how we will interact with each other, or how we will disagree, or when we're going to take something so far, like as a group, maybe working with each other, and just basically the respect that we want to show each other. Make a solid list of what we can agree to as a group in that aspect.
Well, I'm going to speak. I didn't have any agenda coming into this. I ran in 2011 before public seemed to be getting a little excited about things, and my agenda is the same thing as why I got into this. I want to help kids, and my passion is for the kids. and the people that don't have a voice at the table. That's all my work is about.
What I'm hearing is a need, desire to not only set expectations, which is not usually a definition, for examples. What we also speak about often in education is the difference between standards and expectations. So standards is also what I'm hearing that we also need, whether it be viewed as agreements. A simple way to describe the standard is like the finish line, whatever that goal is. Here's what we want to achieve. The expectations is what the definition you talk about, the fact that expectations should be to use your word. Is grace, which doesn't mean that I excuse all behavior. It means that I'm assuming that we were doing your best. An effective effort means that, hey, I believe in you, love you, I want you to be successful, and I will do everything with my power to not let you fail. That's the work that we expect from our leaders in the classrooms, those who support our leaders in the classrooms, our principals, board administrators, as well as our district staff. And obviously we have a team, so a unique opportunity to work with several teams, and this is one of them. So how do we, with this conversation, and I think this is part of it, the more conversation we have, the more we learn and understand. And so, we've had several conversations recently. We've seen some improvement. We also know that there's still work to be done. There will always be work to be done. Director Beninger, one of the conversations I heard you mention, and I appreciate, we need to know where we fall short. We need to know where we fall short more than where we're being successful. We need to know that too. We also need to know where we're falling short. The predatory lending, just an example, that's important. That's not information that was common knowledge to me. And I can tell you, just so you know, it's common knowledge to me for EverFi. My conversations with staff who work for EverFi is that there were students when I was mentoring Howard at KPA 2 years ago. We had one of our many conversations, and he said, I said, tell me one thing that you wish you would have had or learned before you were ready to graduate. He says, I really wish that I could have learned or should have learned how to balance a checkbook. Financial literacy, that's what EverFi does. That is what they do. And those courses are actually offered at KPA for that reason. So I know that sometimes best intentions not always align with everyone's direct result, which is impact, but know that the intent for EverFi was not to subject our students to predatory lending patterns. If that's something that we need to look into, certainly that's something that would be appropriate for us to discuss. But the purpose was for us to give our students an opportunity. Like they said, when we leave Kent School District, we don't just want to be graduates, we want to be able to learn how to manage our resources. So that's just one example.
Well, let me say that the thing that got me, my attention to that was, and first of all, I said on Facebook, I think it's wonderful to have these Seahawks men coming into KM and role models and all that. It's great. And the curriculum. But when I was drawn to the attention that a finance company was developing a history on African American culture, I just went, why would they want to do that? Just from common sense. You know? What would be the purpose with them developing this unless they were going to get something out? That's it. That's why I brought up the question.
I know large corporations have
Right.
a lot.
Well, I look at it from a sales and marketing perspective. You're going to get a whole database of people that want to have financial help with loans and stuff like that. That's the way I look at it. And I didn't know, and I still don't know, and I just asked some questions about it. That's what drew my attention, because I wouldn't want these kids to be getting their names, and quite frankly, the protocol and everything says they do put their, they put their name in and their email address so they can contact them, and it falls under our policies that if the kid is, the student is doing that stuff, they can do that. They can have their email and their contents. And I mean, I talked to David Radford, who I know well at KM, and he says, oh, no, that wouldn't be happening. And that's just what kind of triggered my thing, is like, it just didn't make sense to me. Why would they want to do that? Now, if you're telling me they're selling classes on financial, how to balance checkbooks and stuff like that, that makes sense. But when you look in their background, you can't see a whole lot about that when you research their company. And when you hear financial lending, I'm thinking, why would they want to get into this? Because you know, I come from a business background. When you want to go in and you want something out of it. I mean, you're not there just to be.
So, let's say,
They want to sell computers, they want to sell something.
and I don't want to dismiss what you just said. I do know of financial organizations that they have to pay for some sort of law, like Wells Fargo has been doing financial literacy training at IGRAC. So I don't know if anybody's aware of that, you know, that has happened.
And that's great.
You know, those kinds of things do happen.
But I mean, I didn't say anything. I was asking. I just wanted to make sure the kids were, I didn't have.
So I don't know, I guess I feel like, you know, where are the people who are directing these questions to the organizations, or, you know, trying to understand why is what they do, you know, what is the reason behind it? Yes, we can make
Right.
assumptions.
But, yeah, so and for me, as a new board director, my concern is I just want to see the data sharing agreement. I want to see that all the steps were followed. Yes, it came to us after the fact, and, you know, I'm sure that had a bit to do with the Seahawks schedule and things like that, and I don't disagree that it's not good to have the Seahawks in our schools because they're, you know, successful, and it's always awesome for students to have people like that are successful, and they have careers, and they have knowledge to share. You know, so whether it's a celebrity of any type, you know, I think we've had other, you know, celebrities, you know, and it's great for kids to have, you know, see people that are successful at their careers. And again, you know, I take it very seriously that we're supposed to make sure that we're doing everything to protect kids. And in that instance, I just wanted more information, and I wanted to make sure that every procedure was followed properly, because if it comes back that, you know, kids got emails, you know, in whatever capacity, I would want to feel confident that I'd done everything I could to make sure that they were protected in that specific instance. So that's where my brain goes. It goes into starts with the little specifics, but then it goes into the 3,000-foot level and how that could end up. And you know, predatory lending is one of those things. And I don't have any, you know, but I've researched the company, and I have no, you know, evidence that they've done that to any of our students. But again, I thought that my responsibility is to make certain that our kids are protected in every way. And this is curriculum, and it really, if you read policy, the curriculum comes down to the board. We're the final arbiter on curriculum if parents are upset or complain. And so I take it seriously. And so in that particular instance, and then not getting the information, it feels like, you know, again,
Just out of curiosity, were there any complaints that you had not yet aware of, or any complaints you know of?
I don't know of any complaints, but again, you know, I don't know, I'll be honest, as a parent, I haven't gone, okay, let me see your textbook and the curriculum and stuff, but now that I'm a board director and that came before me, A, I was alarmed that I knew it already was in the schools and it hadn't been approved. And B, you know, I read that whole policy book, and I'm reading law now. And again, I take it seriously that kids are protected and not targeted for anything. And when it is, especially if it's something digital, there's more opportunity for things that I'm not aware, and I haven't, and again, I think that curriculum should be part of our regular curriculum for all students in this district. So I have no problem, I think, like I said, I think that, and I haven't looked at all the history curriculum, I have no problem with the curriculum itself. I have a problem that I don't know, I haven't seen the data agreement and things like that, that policy says that's, or procedure says that's part of all the steps, to make sure that things get in properly.
So I do think, Michelle, I want to acknowledge, I do think what you say, everything that you said, I can't argue with you, because I've been in that position where I haven't received the information that I needed.
Right.
And I think as individuals, we have every right not to make a decision we're uncomfortable about it. We do have to voice what the reasoning is behind that, and it's not just to say no to everything we see, but these are the reasons why I don't agree with this decision. It's just too quick, and one of the challenges we have is that we are so limited in time. We have half an hour executive sessions to talk about myriad of issues that come to us.
Yeah.
How we can remember all that in half an hour. There was a call to get rid of executive sessions, by the public, and you cannot get rid of an executive session for the reasons we just experienced.
Yeah.
So, there are things like that, these decisions take time, and it's a big challenge being on board and having to make a decision quickly, and trusting our district to do the job.
I don't feel like, I feel like that is something that we five can agree on, whether, we feel comfortable with half-hour executive session. I was looking at different districts. In fact, I pulled Auburn's policy, their protocol policy is very nice. But
Rarely have executive session.
yeah, but their protocol policy is really, I really like it. So it looks like it popped up. But something to look at. But I noticed at Renton School District, because I heard you talk about involving the community, and I heard you talk about involving the community, and Renton is a district that goes to different schools, and there's obviously challenges with that. But I noticed on their board agenda that they do old business, they do new business, and then they have it listed executive session is the last thing, and then they adjourn, and it'll, so on their board docs, it'll say no executive session or executive session. And it might be a case of, again, that's, I think, something we can discuss and agree on. Is it better to have an executive session at the end where we can have a longer length of time? And the challenge to that is then you're not going to vote on something that, in executive session until the following board meeting. But is that something that, would be good for all of us, so then we'd have the time to really ponder? Because sometimes I'm a person that I'll just share, so you have expectations of me. I don't do well without having the opportunity to ponder it.
So thinking about that, and I know how we're in it, but I also know they are very intentional about ending their meetings at a particular time, because staff has to stay for executive session. So what that could mean for us is potentially a midnight meeting.
Right.
And so I would not.
Not
So,
for us.
but I'm saying,
Right,
that's the
right.
things that I think you have to take into
Right.
consideration is that staff is involved.
Mhm.
And so consider, and like I said, they have very few, I know Auburn has very few executive sessions. I'm not sure how many Renton has, but I don't think they have. I will say Kent is one of the places that I've seen that has them almost every time. I mean, it's just kind of a unique thing. And I think Seattle has some frequent ones too. But so I think, again, when we're considering, absolutely, but just considering everything involved, because,
Right.
and the whys of certain districts do, how they do things, because districts are very different in how their boards act and how they're, and Pam Teal is actually, she was one of my mentors when I first got started. We've been friends for a really long time, so we had lots of conversations about their board meetings. So it's just something to consider. But that's something we can definitely work through in our protocol. That's kind of what we established. So those are the things we established for sure. And I think also, go back to what you were saying about, because I agree with Maya. One of the things I've realized is, yes, everything that happens in this district pretty much falls on the board. Now, I'm not an expert on curriculum, I won't be. I'm not an expert on, graduation requirements necessarily as far as the specifics of, what that looks like. I'm not an expert on testing, I'm not an expert, there's so much that there's no way as a board member that I can be informed about every single decision. And so I think at some point, like Maya said, we have to trust our district and the people that work in our district who are in charge of curriculum and instruction, that they're doing their job. I do understand when there's questions and concerns that we should be directed to be able to, where we can find those answers, or that, I guess for me, I think that's a very large job. I'm not an expert on master scheduling and all of those things that are responsibilities of building administrators and those types of things. So I think even though we are ultimately responsible for all of that, and so I just think about what's realistic about, what it is that we do and are able to have an impact on, and prioritizing those things and trusting at some point, we have to trust our staff and we have to trust that people are doing their jobs. And sometimes maybe that proves it, maybe that it proves it, instances where they're not, but I think that it's a balance that I think, because it could be a full-time job. Like you said, it could be, it takes a lot to read through all of those things, and it's a lot. It could be a full-time job. And for those of you that are able to do that and don't have to work and don't have, and are able to do that and don't have kids to take to practice and kids to do things, I think that's great. But I don't know if setting that expectation as a board is appropriate. I think individually we can go as far as we want to in it, but I think when you begin to try and, as a board, I think we have to determine how we can work again that's respectful to everyone's time and everyone's ability to be able to participate in that.
And since we're, because it's always good to have an example. So like, for me, and when I read policy and I see the procedure, so when I asked for the documents, I assumed procedure had been followed properly and that those documents would just be easily available and I could just see them, right? And so, again, I've spoken my truth that when we're trying to build trust, the closer the words spoken match the documents I see, and then that every time that happens, then that builds more trust. And so, it's not been my experience as a constituent and even as a board director. That's not been my experience yet. And so, like I said at the beginning of this conversation, this is a good conversation, and this is how we build relationships and trust, is, ethically, when you're a board and you supervise someone, we have to give every chance to succeed, and we have to make certain that expectations are clear. And so I come from a place of, I read the policy, I read the procedure, and so if it, based on policy or procedure or written word, if I hear that a decision is made on something because this costs less than this, it's like, oh, okay, I just want to see the cost-benefit analysis so I understand it better. And I would assume that, when you make financial decisions on something, that there would, you know what I mean? So for me, and the way I learn and take in information and feel comfortable, if there's policy and procedure, or if word spoken would indicate that something which has already been done, it feels then like something's being hidden. It's like, oh yeah, no, we have that, you can come in and look at it. And, so.
I think it's really important that you take the message back to staff, because I think we've talked about this multiple times, where the board needs to be comfortable in making the decisions that they need to make. And I would say, in fairness, some of the things that I've brought up, and I haven't found it sometimes with budget issues, but some of the requests I've made, staff have really attempted, for example,